So, good afternoon, sir. Maybe in 1 or 2 minutes we'll get started, sir. I hope I'm audible, sir. Yeah. Good afternoon, sir. Shall we start, sir?
I'm ready.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir. Thank you, sir. So, good afternoon, one and all. Very warm welcome to 9th edition of SAMVAAD and 2nd edition of GCoE-ACE talk. Today's talk is co-hosted by Global Center of Excellence in Affordable and Clean Energy, IIT Dharwad, under the series TREES. TREES stands for Talks on Renewables, Empowering Earth and Sustainability. Today, we have a distinguished speaker, Shri Ramakrishna YB, who is currently member of Working Group on Biofuels, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. He is also a member of Apex Committee on Methanol Economy, Niti Aayog, and chairman of Study Steering Committee on Availability of Surplus Agriculture Biomass in India, Ministry of Science and Technology. Shri Ramakrishna is an electronics engineer by training and had an illustrious career in research, marketing, and business development. His journey on environment protection and alternative energy started in 1986 and is now completely devoted to bioenergy program. He chaired the task force on biofuels in Karnataka. He later was made the chairman of Karnataka State Biofuel Development Board with the rank of a minister. He is now playing his role at all India level in promoting biofuels as a member expert on the working groups on biofuels, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Government of India. He has been instrumental in drafting the National Biofuel Policy 2018 and many biofuel initiatives in India. He has also played a catalytic role in formation of Indo-EU cooperation in advanced biofuels and in formation of BioFuture platform. In addition, he is founder chairman of Samagra Vikas, a Bangalore-based voluntary organization working on alternative energy, environment protection, and rural development. And he is a trustee of Samhara Trust, a Bangalore-based institution working with children with neurological disorders. Recognizing his contribution, Shri Ramakrishna YB has been bestowed with many awards and recognition. Prominent among these are Lifetime Contribution to Bioenergy Award by Karnataka State Bioenergy Development Board and Outstanding Green Energy Activist Award by Indian Federation of Green Energy. Please join me in welcoming Ramakrishna YB for SAMVAAD. Sir, it's our pleasure to have you on SAMVAAD and second talk of GCoE-ACE under TREES. Before I hand over to the speaker, I have a request to the audience. Please type your questions and answers in the Q&A box at the bottom right side of the screen, and the same would be discussed with Sir after presentation. Sir, over to you. Welcome and thank you once again, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me at the outset, thank IIT Dharwad for inviting me to deliver this talk. Let me start sharing my screen right now. You are able to see that? Hello? Can you
Not
see
yet, sir. Not
Sorry?
yet, sir. Not yet, sir. Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet, sir.
1 second.
Yeah, we are able to see your screen, sir.
Great,
Yeah.
great.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the biofuels, is something that is being looked into quite seriously as an alternate source of energy all over the world. And if you really look at how this program is shaping at the global level, there are two primary concerns which drive the program at the global level. One is, every country is really looking at energy security, and obviously the other important issue is the environmental concerns. India, as we all know, is one of the major importer of crude oil. Almost 84% of our crude is being imported into the country. I think, energy security is of prime importance for a country like India. And of course, the environmental concerns, we all know that every country has been looking at, you know, uh, low carbon, fuels, and then ultimately looking at a net zero kind of environment to be created at the global level. And India is also has set a target of achieving net zero by 2070. So, apart from energy security and the environmental concerns, there is a third dimension which drives the program in India. We know that the India is a agrarian society, and the agriculture in India has reached a kind of a cross, at this point of time, where we have to really think in terms of sustaining the agriculture in the country. So, the biofuel program would really become a tool for rural development and bringing the kind of stability that is really required in the agricultural sector at this point of time. When we talk about the use of biofuels, from time immemorial, we have been using biomass for meeting our heat and energy requirement. But when we talk about some of the liquid fuels, in fact, we started the program way back in 1940s. During the Second World War, when we had some serious issues with regard to the import of crude and processing within the country, we started blending ethanol in, petrol, and we called it as power petrol. In Mumbai city, all the buses were run with 20% ethanol blended petrol. At those time, all the buses were run on, they were on petrol engines. And all the ethanol that was required, it was incidentally manufactured in the state of Karnataka. It all went from the city of Mandya, where we had the cooperative sugar mill, thanks to the visionary Vishweswaraya, and he was the one who introduced this program at the national level way back in 40s. In the recent times, the ethanol blending program was started in 2003, and thanks to the then the Minister of Petroleum, Mr. Ramnaik. We had invited him for a program in Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, which was jointly organized by the voluntary group that I work for, Samagra Vikas, and IISc. That is where the idea of blending ethanol started, and within 2 or 3 months, Mr. Ramnaik started the ethanol blending program in petrol. Karnataka was the first state to adopt the biofuel policy. When I was the chairman of the Karnataka State Biofuel Board, we came up with a policy in March 2009. And at the national level, Government of India also adopted a policy in 2009. It was pretty much based on the Karnataka policy itself. So the national policy in 2009 set a target of blending about 20% ethanol in petrol and 20% biodiesel in diesel by 2017. But unfortunately, there was a policy document, but there was no program that was put in place, and there was no clear-cut roadmap or strategy until 2014. When there was a new government formed at the national level under the leadership of the present Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, the entire biofuel program was revised and revived. So, incidentally, it so happened that the then Petroleum Minister Dharmendra Pradhan invited me to be his advisor to look into the biofuel program and to really see what kind of interventions that are required at the national level to make this into a really robust national program. So when in 2000, October 2014, when we reviewed the biofuel policy and the kind of target and the program that was being implemented at the ground level, to our surprise or shock, we realized that the ethanol blending was happening at only 1%, 1.4% on pan-India basis, as against a target of achieving 20% blending by 2017. And biodiesel program blending had not started at all. That is when the government decided that this has to be taken up on a mission mode, and a national working group was constituted in June 2015. I was invited to be the chairman of the national working group. I had a term for 3 years between June 2015 to June 2018, and I continued there as a member on this working group even after June 2018. Now, basically, the working group started looking into the program within the country and outside the country. And there was a biofuel cell was also created in the Ministry of Petroleum for day-to-day administration of the whole program. In the meantime, Prime Minister had set a target to reduce the fossil fuel import by 10% by 2022. This was way back in 2015, he gave the target. And we thought, in addition to taking many other measures, improving the efficiency, increasing the local production, etc., we thought biofuel substitution for petroleum fuels had very high potential. So that is how we started this program. One of the some of the few things that we did, once the national working group was formed, was looking at shifting the entire biofuel program from the administrative control of MNRE to MoP&NG, because MNRE was more focused on solar and wind, and to a small extent on the biogas program, but not really seriously looking into the biofuel program. So the working group also started working on the new biofuel policy. We came up with a new policy. I will talk about the highlights of the policy a little later. And some 50 billion rupee biofuel fund was also proposed. So keeping in mind the realities at the ground level, a new target was set. We were looking at 10% ethanol blending by 2022 and 20% blending by 2030. However, some of the initiatives that we took in the last few years, it has given us the confidence that we will be able to reach 20% blending by 2030, 2025 itself. So we have advanced the target of blending 20% ethanol in the petrol by 2025. And we have a target to blend biodiesel to an extent of 5% by 2030. There have been some new institutional mechanisms. We have a national biofuel coordination committee, because it's not just the Ministry of Petroleum. There has to be a lot of coordination between various different ministries. The Biofuel Coordination Committee has about 10 to 12 ministry secretary level people sitting on that committee. And every state has been encouraged to set up a biofuel development board or authority for pushing this program forward. And of course, many of the ministries have been roped in at this point of time. The biofuel policy itself focuses on the first generation ethanol, second generation ethanol, also looking at biodiesel blending program, compressed biogas, and of course looking at some of the futuristic fuels like methanol, dimethyl ether, drop-in fuels, hydrogen, etc. In 2016, when we reviewed the situation, the motor spirit or the petrol consumption, was in the order of about 32 billion liters at the national level, and by 2022 we expected that it would go up to 44 billion liters. And the amount of ethanol that was required for blending in 2016 and 2022 figures are there. And then when we looked at the availability of the ethanol was only available through the molasses route. and the quantities were highly inadequate to achieve that kind of 10% blending. There was a big deficit in 2016 itself, and that deficit would grow in 2022 if we were to achieve 10% blending. So a lot of steps were taken to augment the first generation ethanol supplies. Basically, we were looking at, the instead of a tendering process, we were looking at kind of an administered pricing process. There were a lot of restrictions on the interstate movement, taxation on the ethanol. So those things have been removed. More than some of these administrative hurdles that were being removed, we were also looking at other methods, other steps to be taken. So, for example, all the ethanol I mentioned to you that it came from the molasses route, and so we decided that instead of just C molasses, we can also use B molasses, sugarcane juice, as well as sugar syrup. This basic decision was taken because, if you really look at the sugar industry in the last 10 years, sugar industry has been producing almost every year 6 million metric tons of excess sugar in the country, which we are not able to consume within the country. And we are not able to sell it in the markets outside India, basically because the sugar prices outside India is quite low. It's lower than the production cost. The government was spending something like 5 to 6,000 crores to subsidize the sale of this excess sugar in the countries outside India. So we took a decision that why don't we control the sugar production in the country and divert all the excess molasses as well as the sugarcane juice to produce ethanol. So this has really given a big boost to our program. Not only that, that 5-6,000 crore that we were giving in subsidy to export sugar from India has been stopped. Even the import of crude, to the extent that we are producing ethanol, has come down. Now, what the policy also allows some of the damaged and surplus food grains to be converted into ethanol. As we all know that any kind of sugary product or starch or cellulose can be converted into ethanol. So in a country like India, I mentioned about excess sugar production. Similarly, our food grain production was also excess, though we had some shortage with regard to oilseed production and some of the protein-rich crops. The food grains, we had surplus, and almost year after year, some 40 to 50 million metric tons of food was being wasted by, in India. So we thought that food grain can be diverted for producing, ethanol, and also encouraging farmers to grow some crops which can meet our energy needs also. So these are some of the kind of interventions that we took in, and there was almost 18 billion rupees scheme was introduced. Basically, if somebody want to set up a new plant, then they would get a lot of interest subvention. Interest subvention scheme with almost $18 billion fund was created by government of India. And if you really see with some of the interventions that we have made, how the arrival, of ethanol in the market has gone up. This is something that you see it on the graph. Somewhere around 100 million liters in 2012-13. In 2020-21, we have crossed about 2,800 million liters. That's almost about 2.8 billion liters of ethanol has been produced, and that's where we have reached in the last decade or so. And if you also look at the percentage blending, we have been creating a kind of an ecosystem where we are looking at demanding a lot of ethanol in the market. And if you really see the last year, although the last year figure it shows a 7.63, that was until 31st October. But in the last sugar year, we did cross 8.2%. So we are on track And in the year 2022, we will be crossing 10% across the country. And this kind of blending will be done all over the country and all 365 days in a year. So this is what we have been able to achieve in the last 5, 6 years. And now, we get earlier, as I mentioned, all the ethanol came from C heavy molasses, but now we have, ethanol coming from C heavy, B heavy molasses, sugarcane juice, damaged food grains, surplus rice, corn, maize, etc. And we have differential pricing because the feedstock price changes, the processing cost changes. Although it's the same ethanol, we have, just to encourage the industry, a differential pricing has been set. Well, that may not be adequate, as we move forward to meet our demands in future. So the policy already takes care of the sugary material as well as the starch to be converted into ethanol. But we also had to look for a program where we can convert cellulose also into ethanol. India being a agrarian society, we generate humongous amount of agricultural residue. In fact, I chaired the study of Department of Science and Technology to look into the excess surplus biomass that is available in the country. We did some study across the country for about 10 major crops. And from that 10 major crops, we realized that the total biomass that we generated was in excess of 1 billion metric tons. And even after, using it for various other purposes, almost about 180 to 200 million metric tons of this agricultural residue was being burnt on the field or being wasted. And if you really look at the kind of diversity of agricultural crops that we have in the country, there is something like 200 to 300 million tons of surplus biomass that is being burnt on the farmer field at this point of time. When we talk about burning, we only think of Punjab and Haryana. That is not really correct. All over the country it happens, but in the Haryana and Punjab burning, it has gained prominence basically because of the pollution it creates in the national capital Delhi. But anywhere, any part of the country, we have so much of agricultural residue which is being burnt. So we saw, the lignocellulosic material is available, but we also have to really look at whether we have the technology. The second generation ethanol or the converting lignocellulosic ethanol into lignocellulosic material into ethanol, we have been talking about it for more than 2 decades. So it had its own challenges. There were a lot of plants that were set up in US and in Europe, which were closed down for various reasons. So when we started reviewing the technologies from across the globe, to our surprise, we found that 2 of the Indian technologies, there were about 5 or 6 Indian technologies available. A couple of them, one from Praj Industries in Pune, the other one from Indian, chemical ICT, Institute of Chemical Technology in Mumbai. They had quite good technology and demonstrated at 10 to 12 tons per day kind of scales. But we did have the challenges of scaling it. However, we took the risk and we said, okay, if we have these kind of technologies and even technologies which are ready for scaling from across the globe can be invited. And then we directed all the oil marketing companies to set up about 12 commercial plants based on either Indian or imported technology. Now, 5 of them have been fast-tracked and the work on the ground has already begun. And I think most of these plants are going to be commissioned in the next 6 months to about a year or so. Let me spend a minute or so here on the technology. Basically, when we talk about lignocellulosic ethanol, any kind of agricultural residue, basically it is a combination of cellulose and lignin. We had to first break the lignin-cellulose bond, which is the most difficult part of it. And then you get the C5 and C6 sugars. So handling C5 sugar, C6 sugar is quite easy. C6 is a challenge. We need to hydrolyze both C5 and C6 sugars. And then once it is hydrolyzed, then you can ferment that to get ethanol. So the technology, the science is well understood. But then there were challenges of actually, looking at achieving those kind of conversion efficiencies and doing it at costs that are acceptable. Now, the major issue with second generation ethanol at this point of time is the high capex and operating expenses. Capex is quite high basically because we are not set up any large plants at the global level. Now there are a couple of them in Brazil and in Romania as well as in Italy. But as one country, India probably is setting up the maximum number of second generation ethanol plants. At this point of time, there are four on ground which are being commissioned. So there are challenges of addressing the technology gaps that we have, challenges of scaling, how to reduce the capex and operating expenses. So in the last 4 or 5 years, tremendous amount of work has been done. Say, for example, when you are talking about the ethanol price, almost one-third of the price of second generation ethanol is in enzyme. So all the enzyme that was required was being imported into the country. We decided that let us have our own enzyme facility, enzyme program, a research program, and then if you are able to integrate enzyme production with the second generation ethanol plant, then the cost would come down considerably. So all these steps have been taken, and then of course the kind of market ecosystem is also being created, where there will be 100% offtake guarantee being offered by oil marketing companies, and a differential higher pricing is going to be made available. And since the capex is being quite high, government has also set aside almost about 1900 crore rupees. That's about 250 million US dollars. And each of these plant will get a capital subsidy of something up to 20 million US dollars per plant. So all these steps have been taken to make sure that some of the wasted resources like agricultural resources is converted into useful ethanol. And when you produce ethanol, you also get a byproduct, which is lignin. And also you will be able to generate humongous amount of biogas from the vinasse, which comes as a byproduct. This is one of the picture of a plant that was set up with the technology that was developed by Institute of Chemical Technology. This is in Uttarakhand. This is a 10-ton per day kind of a facility. For some reasons which I can't state here, this technology we are not able to take it forward. But otherwise, this is probably compared with one of the best technologies from across the globe. Now, this is the technology that was developed by Praj in Pune. They have a 12-ton per day kind of a plant, which is operating for the last 5-6 years now. They had a 1 ton per day kind of a plant, which have been operating from 2008 onwards. Now, we are trying to move ahead of second generation ethanol. There are other possibilities like third generation ethanol, where we are really looking at carbon capture and utilization. World's first such plant where the tail end gases from a refinery that is in Panipat in Haryana, a plant is being set up where we capture all the gases that are being let into the atmosphere, and that goes through a technology, a process called gas fermentation. They combine carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and hydrogen into ethanol, and this combining is done by the microbes. So this is the first of its kind plant, and this is also going to be commissioned by July, August this year. And then we have also floated expression of interest by Center for High Technology in Delhi for this kind of plant to be set up in 14 more refineries. So a lot of work on feasibility studies have been initiated. Not only the tail end gas, but there are a lot of different types of biomass and municipal solid waste, which may not be ideally suited for our second generation ethanol. So in such a case, we can take them through a gasification process. And once you have the syngas, even the syngas can go through a fermentation process. Once you have syngas, you can also think in terms of combining them through a catalytic route, or taking them through a gas fermentation route. In fact, in this area also, there is going to be a demo and a commercial plant which are going to be set up by BPCL and MRPL. And this MRPL plant is going to be coming quite close to IIT Delhi, IIT Dharwad campus. It's going to be in Ranebennur. Apart from third generation, we are also looking at different types of agri residues, as well as some of the sewage, sludge, municipal solid waste, which can all be converted into biocrude. So Reliance Industries have developed some fantastic technology called catalytic thermal liquefaction technology. And this technology is now they are really looking at commercializing it. So the biocrude, once you have, this can be co-processed with the petroleum crude in our refineries, or you can also have standalone refineries where biocrude can be processed to get different types of biofuels as well as drop-in fuels. So I mentioned about this ethanol plants. These are the locations where it is coming up. You see the first three plants are coming up in Haryana, Bhargad in Orissa, Bathinda in Punjab, where humongous quantities of paddy straw is available. Each of these plants will be processing about 500 tons of paddy straw a day and produce about 100 kiloliters of ethanol with lignin and biogas as the byproduct. Numaligarh refineries in Assam, they are setting up another plant where they produce about 160 kiloliters of ethanol per day, plus acetic acid and furfural as the byproduct. See, they are only converting C6 into ethanol, and C5 will be converted into acetic acid and furfural for the sustainability and viability of the entire project. So, I know on the right, I have given the dates for trial runs as well as the commercial production dates. And the last one that you see is the plant that I mentioned, which is being set up by IOCL with the LanzaTech technology, where the tail end gas is going to be captured and through the gas fermentation, ethanol is going to be produced. This plant also is expected to be commissioned later during this year. So with all the steps that we have taken, this is the kind of roadmap that we have until 25-26. How much of grain-based ethanol capacity is going to be built in the country? How much molasses-based? And if you see by 25-26, we are looking at producing something like 15 billion liters of ethanol in the country, as against the 2.8 billion liters of ethanol being produced in the last sugar year. So when we do this, probably we will be on par with United States of America and Brazil in terms of the volume of ethanol that is going to be produced in the country. Now, we are looking at something like, I mentioned by this year, before end of this year, we would have done 10% blending, for which we require about 4 billion liters, as against 2.8 billion liters last year. We may cross 4 billion liters this year. We may even go up to 11% blending. And then, as I mentioned earlier, 20% blending has been advanced to 2025, for which we require approximately 10 billion liters, or slightly less than that. But by 25-26, as I said, we will, from first generation ethanol itself, we will be producing, first generation itself will be producing 13 to 14 billion liters. And another 1.5 billion liters will come from second generation and third generation ethanol. So for our transport requirement, we will have something like 11 to 12 billion liters of ethanol for blending purpose. And we require another 3.5 billion liters for our, for potable ethanol, as well as for meeting some of the industrial needs. So we are also looking at introducing flexi engines as far as the vehicles are concerned. Now we are looking at a kind of an ecosystem that Brazil has. In Brazil, we know that they blend up to 27% ethanol in petrol, and what they sell as petrol has 27% ethanol in it. Side by side, they also sell 100% ethanol. So it is up to the buyer or the consumer to decide what will be the final percentage of blend in his vehicle. So the flexi engine essentially can operate from 100% petrol to 100% ethanol, or any blends in between. So we have also directed the automobile manufacturers in the country that they have to start releasing the flexi engines, yeah, and also some vehicles, the two-wheelers and three-wheelers, which would probably run on 100% ethanol. Moving over from completely switching over from fossil fuels to home-produced biofuels. And then there are other uses for ethanol. Apart from blending it in petrol, we can also blend ethanol in diesel without any modification to the diesel engine. And we have done some experiments. In fact, in Karnataka, we ran about 2,200 buses for almost 2 years with 7.8% ethanol blended in diesel and with excellent results. Now we are really looking at once the ethanol availability goes up, we are really looking at how this ethanol diesel blends can be sold in the Indian market. A lot of work is being done in that area. Apart from that, we are also looking at ethanol route for production of sustainable aviation fuel. Presently, the aviation transport fuel, we consume about 6 million metric tons of aviation transport fuel in the country, which is all coming from the crude sources. So it is also possible for us to produce sustainable aviation fuel from ethanol, and this will be a reality in shortly. In fact, Praj and IOCL have signed an MOU to start a sustainable aviation fuel to ethanol route program shortly. Now, I think I did discuss quite a bit about ethanol, but let me spend a few minutes on the biogas program. Like I was saying, we started the ethanol blending program way back in 1940s in this country, but we gave it up for various reasons. World's first biogas plant was set up way back in 1893 in Matunga. Today, we go to other countries to understand the anaerobic process technology. But even a country like Germany, they came to India, they came to Indian Institute of Science 30 years ago. They took the technology from here, and what they have done is commercialization of these technologies. So we are a pioneer when it comes to biogas also. The MNRE started a biogas program in 81, 82, but they were essentially small home-based biogas plant. And they were looking at meeting some of the domestic cooking gas requirement, and some larger plants were only looking at meeting some of the heating requirements and production of electricity and things like that. However, we never really looked at upgrading the biogas to methane, and then that was basically because of lack of market for the compressed biogas. And we had not even thought of using bio-CNG or the compressed biogas as a transport fuel, as a replacement for LPG. So we had to create a policy for biogas, looking into the pricing, blending, marketing, and distribution policy, and certain regulatory mechanisms. So one of the great thing about the biogas program is, when you produce biogas, you also produce large quantities of biomanure, which can go back to our fields. And then, of course, we also generate quite a bit of CO2. And today, apart from using CO2 in our aerated drinks and also as a dry ice, there are a lot of technologies which are shaping up to convert even CO2 into our fuels in future. And, when I was talking about second generational ethanol, I was talking about the agricultural residues that we had tried to quantify what is available for this kind of program. And when we were talking about the CBG, that the biogas program, we were also looking at other waste streams. You had a spent wash, press mud that comes from sugar industry, a lot of MSW that we generate in all our large cities all over the country. And then we have the sewage water. We have the recoverable animal dung. So if you really look at it, this is the number that we have here is quite a conservative number. But if you really look at the bio-CNG potential, with this kind of waste, it is possible for us to produce about 62 million metric tons of bio-CNG. And in the process, we generate something like 373 million metric tons of compost or fermented manure. So that's the kind of potential it holds. So we decided that we launch a program. If not that 62 million metric tons, can we look at least 15% of the 25% of what is possible? See, if you really look at the kind of total consumption of LPG, CNG, LNG, whatever you call, all sorts of gases, is in the order of 45 million metric tons. And if you really see bio-CNG potential in the country, it is about 62, which is again a conservative number, which means the 100% of the petroleum gases that we are burning, or the natural gases that we are burning, can completely be replaced with the bio-CNG. So we started a program called SATAT. SATAT stands for Sustainable Alternatives to Affordable Transportation, looking at CBG as a transport fuel. Basically, the target is to set up about 5,000 commercial plants by 2025. This calls for an investment of nearly 2 lakh crore rupees. So each of these plants will start processing about 50 to 100 tons of different types of feedstock and 5 to 10 tons of CBG every day. So by the end of 2025, we are looking at 5,000 commercial plants, 15 million metric tons of CBG to be produced, which will replace about 75% of the total import of CNG and LNG, and also 35% of the total consumption at national level. So here again, for this program, there is a 100% offtake guarantee being assured by oil marketing companies at quite remunerative prices, and it has been declared by RBI as a priority industry, and low-cost financing is also available for these projects. Now, if you really look at the SATAT program, the base price announced is about 46 rupees per kg of this gas, plus 5% GST. As I mentioned, it's a priority industry already. State Bank of India, Punjab National Bank, Bank of Baroda, and many other banks have come up with a program to finance this project. As of 1st October, the number has gone up. So more than 3,278 letter of intent has been issued. And if I remember correctly, the MOU that we have signed is in the order of about 2,850 now. I said 13 plants, but this is the old slide. So I think nearly about 24, 25 plants have been commissioned all over the country. And CBG is also being sold through nearly about 50 retail outlets in the country. Now, it is also possible for any biogas producer to inject the biogas into the GAIL gas pipeline or city gas distribution network also. So other important factor, I mentioned to you that for every ton of biogas that we produce, we are also producing 4 to 5 tons of manure. Unfortunately, this manure was not included in the fertilizer control order, which has been done now. And now we are also looking at further valorization of carbon dioxide and how carbon dioxide can also be monetized as we move forward. So I mentioned earlier that the work that we have initiated with the Society of Automobile Manufacturers of India is basically looking at all the second two-wheeler and three-wheeler that comes out after 2025 will run on either 100% ethanol or 100% biogas. There won't be any petrol, diesel, two-wheeler or three-wheelers in India after 2025. The older vehicles will continue, for which the fuels will be there, but the new vehicles will be running on either E100 or on 100% CBG. That's the kind of ecosystem that we are looking at. Here is a picture of a biogas plant where in Pune, this uses about 300 tons of food waste that is collected from homes and from hotels in Pune. That is also from 1/3 of Pune. And they process all the food waste and generate about 14,000 kgs of compressed biogas per day. This is a fully operational plant in Pune. This is how the compressed biogas is stored in cascades, and in fact, IOCL has started branding this compressed biogas, and this is the kind of market outlet that you see quite close to the plant. This is on the Pune-Bombay highway, and this is the kind of facilities that are going to be created all over the country. This is another plant in Fazilka, which is very, in Punjab, very close to the Pakistani border, just about a few kilometers from the border, where they make use of all the paddy straw which was being burnt by the farmers, and they process that paddy straw to generate biogas, and they have been converting that into electricity. Now they are setting up a lot many more plants to convert biogas and into compressed biogas, not into electricity, but as a transport fuel in the future. So I am showing these pictures basically for you to get that confidence that yes, the technology is there, it is mature, and it can be done at certain scale. Now, the also, I mentioned about the byproducts. They have some sprays which they have developed for faster growth of the plant. And look at the manure that they have it on the plate. This is what is being used by those farmers to grow vegetables and also in the paddy fields in Punjab. Now, this is another plant in Tamil Nadu, in Namakkal, where they make use of the press mud from the sugar factory as well as the poultry feed. So this is another 200 ton per day kind of a plant. Unfortunately, here there was no CNG vehicle population at all. So we were wondering as to what we are going to do with all the biogas that's going to be produced here. Now, the textile industries nearby, they were using either diesel or the LPG for cooking of the clothes, before they dye it, and they have completely switched over from LPG or diesel to compressed biogas now. And this is again an end-to-end demonstration of from resources, converting them into useful energy and consuming it locally. And this is the kind of manure that is being branded and being sold to the farmers from the Namakkal plant. And there is another large plant which is going to be commissioned by end of the month in Sangrur in Punjab. They process about 300 tons of paddy straw per day and produce about 33 tons of compressed biogas per day. So I have just a couple of pictures that I took. This is how they bale the paddy straw from the farmer's field and transport it. And this is how it is stored on the plant site. And this plant is going to be commissioned by, as I mentioned, by end of March or early April. It's almost ready. And apart from 33 tons of compressed biogas, it's also going to be generating something like another 200 to 250 tons of biomanure. Well, apart from biogas, we are also looking at biojet fuel. I did mention about that. The biojet fuel can be produced either from ethanol or from any kind of oil, non-edible oil. And the CSIR, facility in Dehradun, Indian Institute of Petroleum, they have developed a technology, to produce biojet fuel from, any type of oil, and they have done it with jet oil. In fact, the first, flight with 25% biojet fuel was flown from Dehradun to, Delhi. In fact, I was also on that flight when we did the testing. And then Indian Air Force has been working very closely with us, and they have, flown AN-32 during the Republic Day period. In 2019, they started, and they continuously been doing it. In fact, they have tested 10% blending of biojet fuel in all the entire range of aircraft that they have been doing it. So currently we are working on biojet policy framework. There is an international agreement called CORSIA, basically looking at how do we reduce the carbon footprint in the aviation sector. So under this program, we are really looking at starting the blending program commercially by 2035, and by 2050, At the international level, 50% of the aviation transport fuel has to be replaced with the biojet fuel. So, keeping that in mind, we are looking at a policy framework and program for the whole country. And as I mentioned before, even we are looking at converting ethanol into biojet fuel also. Well, this was the first flight that was flown within India with biojet fuel. If you really see here, we have five union ministers who came only to receive this flight in Delhi. That shows the importance that Government of India has given for this program. And you will find Dr. Anjan Ray, who is the director of Indian Institute of Petroleum, who is the architect of this technology. And I'm also hiding here, behind the minister. This is something that we initiated earlier. And looking at some of the future possibilities, biodiesel, I mentioned that we have a target to do 5% blending. If I have to start talking about biodiesel, the kind of challenges that we have, probably I may require one more hour. So probably I will do that some other time. But the biggest challenge that we have is the feedstock. Most of the biodiesel that we are producing is based on the imported palm stearin. Within the country, we have identified used cooking oil, acid oil, animal fat, etc., as the low-hanging feedstock, and we have started a program to do that. We are looking at blending 5% by 2030, but we are not being able to even cross 0.2% blending at this point of time. So we have to put in place a feedstock production program involving the farming community to have tree-based oil seeds, short gestation oil seed crops, etc. And a program is shaping up. Apart from that, I did talk about the bio crude. Once you are able to convert the agri residues or municipal solid waste into bio crude or bio oil, then you can think in terms of producing either drop-in fuels or even biodiesel, which can be blended. So we are also looking at methanol and DME. As I was introduced, I am also on the National Apex Committee of methanol, and also the chairman looking at biomass route for production of methanol and DME. This is a future possibility that we are really looking at. This is something, the fuel density is going to be higher, and the cost of production could be quite lower. We will be starting a 15% blending of ethanol in petrol and sold as a branded product very soon in Assam. So we may just do that kind of a pilot in Assam for a few more years before we can think of the methanol program in a big way. And as far as the hydrogen, when we are talking about ethanol, biodiesel, methanol, dimethyl ether, whatever fuels that we are talking about, essentially we are talking about low carbon fuels. But ultimately, we have to move towards zero carbon fuels, which is hydrogen. And we have, the Prime Minister has set a target that the country will achieve net zero by 2070. And we have to move towards that. We have quite a few challenges in terms of organizing the feedstock supply chain, production of more feedstock that is required for our program. Look at all the conversion pathways that are available to us and the kind of challenges that we have in scaling them. We are looking at replacing something like 100 to 120 million metric tons of petroleum products in liquid form, and another 50-60 million metric tons of fuel in gaseous form. So that's a huge number that we are really looking at. So if that has to be 100% replaced by biofuels or the future fuels, it is possible, but we have to really start identifying all the challenges and hurdles that we have and start crossing one by one and ensure that we reach that kind of a net zero target by 2070. Well, that's all I have for the time being, and I would be very keen to get some, have some interaction with you people, and if there are any questions, I would be very happy to answer them.
Yeah. Thank you very much, sir. We do have a lot of questions, and thank you very much for a nice presentation. I will ask the question, sir.
Sure.
First question is biomass collection, providing the right mix of operating condition for ethanol, methanol many times is a challenge. Instead of the final blend for transportation fuel diesel, how is the success of crude biofuel in power backups and generators, sir?
We are already trying to do that basically because of the huge quantities of biomass that is available. NTPC has been directed that certain percentage of the coal has to be replaced with biomass. But we have to understand, one is whether you burn it on the field or burn it inside the power plant. Ultimately, there is going to be a certain pollution. The pollution when you burn it in a power plant is slightly controlled as against burning it on the field. And the second aspect is, let us say when you burn about 500 tons of biomass in a day, you get certain number of electrical units or heat energy. However, when we are looking at converting that into ethanol, the calorific value that you can recover is much higher, and you also get certain byproduct. See, when you are looking at from the energy point of view, maximum energy can be recovered through the ethanol methanol process, basically because you also have other byproducts that you are going to get. And yeah, that is why we have to really look at those kind of technologies where maximum energy and basically talking about the mass energy balance. How do we really get optimize it? So when we are not using it, when you don't have enough plants to process the agricultural residues to produce ethanol, methanol, or biocrude or whatever, until such time, we can think in terms of using it in the power generating plants. But if you are really moving towards net zero, ultimately we are talking about stopping utilization of coal also. So burning anything to produce electricity also had to be stopped. It has to come from renewables in future.
Sure, sir. Just a follow-up question on this by the same person. With the scarcity of coal in the rainy season, will we face a diesel crisis soon? As much diesel is nowadays used for diesel generators.
No, the diesel consumption in the diesel generator has come down considerably in the country, basically because of the uh, availability of the grid electricity in the country. So, yeah, if the coal is not going to be available, as I am saying very clearly that the roadmap is very clear. We are not trying to replace coal with diesel. We are trying to replace diesel itself with biodiesel or any other kind of drop-in diesel, or with methanol, or even with biogas. So the future fuels, whether it is for the transport application or for heating applications, is going to be very different. So we should not be seeing from these new fuels or the new technologies from the point of view of what is our past experience. So we have to really look ahead.
Sure, sure. Next question, sir. What is your view on implementing portable biogas digesters for treating domestic kitchen waste?
Well, like I mentioned to you, there are 46 lakh small biogas plants were set up in the country. And in my slide, I mentioned the government figure where they said 26% of it is not functioning. But let me tell you, it is only less than 26% is functioning at the national level. Well, I have a biogas plant at home, on our rooftop. I kept it, and we do use our, food waste for that as well as for composting. I mean, it is possible, but in a big city like, Bangalore, Delhi, or Mumbai, it is always a challenge. Where are you going to keep the digesters? You have its own issues, but it is possible to have small digesters so that all the wet waste that we generated from within our own house or within our own community can be converted. But ultimately, if you are really looking at meeting some of the large requirement of the transport sector or the industrial heating sector kind of requirement, we need them in large quantities. That is why, and we have those kind of resources also. When I mentioned about agricultural residue, you're talking about 200 to 300 million metric tons a year. Animal waste, which can be collected, is about 1 billion metric ton. So humongous amount of this waste is available. So we have to really think in terms of large quantities and really integrate it with the kind of the ecosystem that we already have in the country, and really see that this kind of fuel is made available for the people.
Okay, sure, sir. Next question. Will not burning biogas also lead to release of CO2 and add to warming of the atmosphere?
See, when we are talking about biogas, the compressed biogas, we are talking about methane. The amount of carbon dioxide that you are going to be releasing is very small. So currently, what is happening is you have so much of wasted resource, whether it is animal dung or agricultural residues, and if you don't use it and if you just leave it out in the open, there is so much of methane that is being released into the atmosphere. So methane itself is much more dangerous than carbon dioxide. So the contribution of methane in comparison with carbon dioxide is almost 3 times. So, but methane is a much cleaner fuel than any other fuel that you can think of at this point of time, and the amount of CO2 that is being released is much smaller. And if you also really look at the entire life cycle analysis, when you do it, the net, it will be negative, in terms of carbon release into the atmosphere. Because, when you're talking about biomass, when you're talking about, there is so much of carbon capture that is going to happen. And if you look at the entire life cycle, then you're talking about carbon negative kind of, whether it is ethanol or biogas, they're all carbon negative fuels.
Yes, sure, sir. So next question is, what would be the thermal efficiency of biogas or biomass or biojet fuel compared to the conventional fuels?
Well, it all depends on the calorific value. So it all depends on what is the kind of engines in which you are going to be burning it. So now, when you are talking about thermal efficiency, but look at the efficiency of the engines that we have been using in the last 100 years or so, whether we use petrol or diesel, the efficiency is very dismal. So it is not just comparing the thermal efficiency of these fuels with that of the conventional fuels. But what we have to really look at is when we are doing this kind of a transition from fossil fuels to biofuels, we also have to keep in mind the energy efficiency of our engines and things like that. So we have to make sure that that is taken care. And what will happen, in case of, let us say, ethanol, when you are talking about 100% ethanol, when it replaces petrol. So as against 1 liter of petrol, probably you may require about 1.4 or 1.5 liters of ethanol. But ethanol is going to be much cheaper compared to petrol. Even if you have to replace 100% of petrol with ethanol, your fuel cost is going to be lower. Pollution levels are going to come down. And the important aspect is the money that has been going out in terms of foreign exchange is all going to stay back within the country. So that is going to significantly contribute to the the local economy. So we have to keep all these things in mind, not just from a perspective of an engineer who will look at thermal efficiency. From the national perspective, from the environmental perspective, from the utilization of the resources that we have, from the point of view of developing new technologies, the kind of contribution it is going to make to the rural economy and the Indian economy. All these factors had to be looked into when we are talking about a program of national scale.
Sure, sir. So in the interest of time, we'll take one last question. This is an interesting question. It is more about implementation. Is there any program to educate farmers in order to grow the biofuel related crops? Even if the farmers grow such crops in their own non-agriculture land, how and what kind of benefits and incentives do they get?
Well, I think there have been. I mean, it's a answer to that will be very long. As the chairman of the working group, I mean, as the chairman of the Karnataka Biofuel Board, we did a lot of work in Karnataka. We worked with more than 300,000 farmers to grow on their marginal land as well as integrate with their agricultural land. They were given, free seedlings to raise, and then they were also provided funding for, maintenance for 2 3 years, and they were also provided funding from NAREGA program for planting and maintenance and all that. So Karnataka, Chhattisgarh, and to a certain extent in Rajasthan, there is a community-driven program where the community is being benefited, and that has to be scaled up at the national level. And even in these states, whatever has been done with the community is only a model. There is plenty of scope for us to scale it up further, and so that these kind of benefits are extended to them. Just to give you, say, for example, in case of ethanol, when in 2014 when we were reviewing, one of the things that we noticed was because of the kind of sugar situation that we were in, most of the sugarcane growing farmers were not paid their dues for years together. There was backlog of 2 years, 3 years. Currently in the under the ethanol program, more than 8 to 10,000 crore is what is being pumped into the sugar mills, and almost 90% of the farmer dues have been cleared. So the farmer's life has become, lot more smoother now, basically because of this kind of a program. So it has to be, whenever we are talking about involving the community, it has to be kind of a win-win kind of a situation. In Punjab, say for example, where the burning is taking place, you may not realize that farmer spends nearly 1,500 to 2,000 rupees to cut it, spread it, and fire it when it dries up. So now there is a situation where people are, the aggregators are going, collecting it, and in some cases they are paying money to the farmers also. So obviously, it is not just the food grain, but agricultural residues will also have a certain price. So we had to work towards a situation where all these things are going to become a commodity in the market, and we create a kind of a win-win situation for all stakeholders in the biofuel program, and farmer is going to be the most important stakeholder. I saw Dr. Srinivas Murthy raising his hand.
Yes.
Sir, you had to unmute.
Yeah, this has been a topic of great interest to me for decades. And I have just 2-3 points, of course, otherwise I can always discuss with you privately. One is, in all these processes, you have said that carbon, CO2, CO are likely to be byproducts, and whether they are going to add to the emission problems. That's number one. Number two, I have is about the stubble burning in North India, which has become a very critical issue. Whether we can take care of it completely through their conversion and to reduce pollution. Number two. Number three is what do I see IIT Dharwad has I think 60 acres of the forest land on their own, and they have linkages with agriculture university close by. And can you clearly suggest some action plan for IIT Dharwad so that they can complement or push some of these activities for demonstration, for R&D, and taking it further? Just I have these three issues which you can clarify.
Sure. So on the first one, yes, some of these technologies we are releasing the carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide into the atmosphere. But I also was telling you that we also have technology where we can capture the CO, CO2, and with green hydrogen being available, we can think in terms of further combining them into ethanol or methanol or whatever it is. Now, there are other interesting technologies that have been developed. you can give me any amount of carbon dioxide. We will convert that into acetic acid through a fermentation process. And acetic acid is used as the feed for growing algae. And from algae, you separate the lipids, and you can produce omega-3 fatty acid as well as biodiesel from that. So you give me 1 ton of CO2, all that CO2 is going to be consumed, and you get about 70 liters of omega-3 fatty acid at 60% purity, and almost about 70 liters of biodiesel from that. So these are the kind of technologies which are emerging, and I would say that in the next 1 to 2 years, many of these technologies can be commercialized, where all that kind of stray gases, CO2, which are being released, can have a mechanism of collecting it and converting that into useful products through this kind of technology. Second, yes, stubble burning is a major issue. This has always been a egg and chicken kind of a situation. So if we had to stop burning, then there has to be another use for it. But the technologies were not there. We had not set up facilities where it would absorb. Now, as I mentioned, once this first few second-generation ethanol plants are, demonstrated at scale, there is a lot of private investment that is coming into this sector in those areas where the biomass is being burned. And in case of compressed biogas, in fact, the oil marketing companies have signed MOUs with the Punjab government, Haryana government, and UP government. In these 3 places alone, we are looking at something like nearly 2,000 compressed biogas plants that are going to be put up, and each of these plants will be processing anywhere between 50 to 100 tons of paddy straw per day. So probably in about 10 to 15 years' time, we may not have any of this stubble burning that's going to happen in those 3 states. Third, you talked about interventions in IIT Dharwad. I think we will discuss that separately. I see Professor Sanat Kumar raising a hand. Sir, you can unmute. Sir, you have to unmute and talk.
Yeah. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay. You are talking about several conversion processes. Okay. And then you produce the compressed gas or ethanol, methanol. I was wondering, in these processes that you are developing, what is the energy balance? Are you putting more energy into this conversion and getting less, or are you putting more energy and getting more energy? Is the energy balance realistic?
Yeah, sir, we have done the, for most of these, we have done the, detailed LCA studies, and energy balance have been done. These are all energy positive kind of technologies. As long as, you are making use of all the waste streams like agricultural residues and things like that. But, it is little dicey when you have to grow this and then convert them. That is basically because, there is a lot of input that goes into growing these crops. Once again, the way I would look at is, see, as though we call ourselves as an agricultural country, nearly about 100 million hectares of land, which are arable kind of a land, where something can be grown, but it has been rendered useless. So we had to think in terms of how do we put this land into use, and efficient way of producing, more feedstock that is really required for bioenergy kind of a program. So it is very important that we look at energy, not only energy positive kind of technology. It has to lead us towards low carbon and ultimately move towards net zero kind of a situation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Now, before we go ahead, sir, I would request now Professor Dheeraj to take few minutes to give an overview of Global Center for Excellence in Affordable and Clean Engineering. So I'll just share my screen and facilitate Professor Dheeraj.
If you don't mind, I am going to go off the line because I have another meeting which starts in 10 minutes.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would like to thank Shri Ramakrishna ji on the behalf of IIT Dharwad, both for accepting and giving a very nice presentation. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you. You all have a wonderful day.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Yes, thank you for joining this talk today. This talk was brought to you by SAMVAAD series and GCoE-ACE. GCoE-ACE is a global center of excellence for affordable and clean energy. And this center is established last month at IIT Dharwad. We have partners, Selco Foundation and Office of Principal Scientific Advisor, Government of India and Honeywell. The center brings you laboratory facilities, upskilling, research and development, mentorship, outreach and talks like TREES. TREES stands for Talks for Renewable Energy, in Renewables, Empowering Earth and Sustainability, hackathons and challenges, innovation support, incubation support, grassroots implementation via Selco Foundation, field level experiences and field deployments, field mentorship and guidance. Establishment of lab equipment is currently going on. We are establishing the lab equipments in testing and measurement. We are establishing a fabrication lab for innovators and incubators, skill development for teaching and skilling purpose, and also R&D lab in power electronics domain. We are planning to have a field test lab as well in nearby village. The motivation for this center is basically the increasing environmental and climate change concerns. And this is basically a sustainable development goal. And these goals are provided by United Nations. And by 2030, we need to achieve these goals. The goal number 7, the SDG 7 is affordable and clean energy, which is called as ACE. And this center is about affordable and clean energy. The targets of SDG 7 are universal access to modern energy, increase a global percentage of renewable energy, double the improvement in energy efficiency, promote access to research, tech and investment in clean energy sector, expand and upgrade energy services for developing countries. Also by 2070, we have to go for net zero emissions. So you can contact this center as by using these email addresses. It is office.ace@iitdh.ac.in and fic.ace@iitdh.ac.in. So thank you for joining this today's talk. I'm giving it to Professor Tejas.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for a nice overview on the GCoE activities. We would like to thank GCoE-ACE for co-hosting with SAMVAAD. SAMVAAD, as you know, is a monthly event, and every talk of SAMVAAD and GCoE will be hosted on our IIT Dharwad website. I thank the audience for taking their valuable time and coming and for being a part of